in terms of governability. So I hope if they move in that direction, they will not lower the threshold. Now, coming back to a couple of the governability challenges, and I'll close shortly. I think it's going to be really important for Taiwan going forward in the vulnerable situation that it is in to avoid slipping back into the intensity of political polarization that has gripped the country now for 16 years. And that is not going to be an easy genie to put back in the bottle, because no matter how much President Tsai tries to transcend this partisanship and be a more kind of conciliatory and bridging figure, you've got social media, cable television, and a lot of social drivers that, as in the United States, are driving an intensity of partisan and ideological polarization that is unfortunately increasingly familiar to us in the United States. I can't stress enough how much I think this would be explosively and gratuitously intensified by a move that some people in the DPP are talking about to try to prosecute the sitting president who's about to retire on May 20th. I think that there needs to be, I'm not saying that if there was a terrible crime committed that I may be unaware of, that you know, any former president should be immune from prosecution. But I think in a healthy, mature democracy that wants to rise to the level of standing and, you know, being a model for other emerging democracies that Taiwan, and for the mainland China, that Taiwan does and I think should aspire to, you know, developing a pattern where every time a president leaves office, the opposition party that comes in, you know, seeks to punish and prosecute him is just not a healthy thing for a democracy. I agree with Kharis, and I would go further. I think the KMT as a political party is in really an existential crisis. They're in need of very deep programmatic and perhaps ideological renovation, and they're in need of nearly thorough organizational renovation. I'd say nearly thorough because presumably a lot of the grassroots networks are still there and could be revived. I think in a way it's sad for the KMT because actually the one young leader they had is the one who was holding back because he could see what was going to happen and he didn't want to be the roadkill. And now that he had to put himself forward, I think, and therefore take responsibility and resign, you know, he's not available, and the party is really facing a difficult challenge. But you know, other parties have faced this and recovered. I want to say two last things. One is that one is about the economy. And it's a really serious contradiction that I think will be one of the great tests of Tsai Ing-wen's leadership in the next 4 years and probably the next 8 years. I think, look, she's more than anything else been, or as much as anything else, a very significant and admired trade negotiator. She's an expert on international trade. So if you put together that with the obvious strategic thinking in the DPP and in much of Taiwan about the need for economic diversification of Taiwan's trade relations, there simply is no higher priority than for Taiwan to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think it's the right thing for Taiwan and the right thing for the region and the right thing for the United States to be encouraging. But to be able to join the TPP, Taiwan is going to need to make painful concessions in terms of liberalizing its own markets, particularly for our agricultural goods, for beef, for pork. And this is going to sorely challenge an important part of her political base, which is all those pork farmers down in the South. and others who are, you know, frankly benefiting from agricultural protection. And at some point, there's no way to resolve that other than to simply do it and try and offer economic adjustment that would enable them to adapt to the new economic realities. But it's going to be painful, and it's a challenge that's coming at some point down the road. Finally, I am really deeply worried, very, very deeply worried about the military trends in the eastern, in the western part of the Pacific, or the East Coast, the East China Sea, the South China Sea, where China is simply barreling forward on a military expansion and modernization campaign. It's, you know, turned an island in the South China Sea unilaterally into an emerging military air base to project air power throughout the region. It's building its own aircraft carriers. And Taiwan is simply going to have to do more, much more, I think, to keep up in cooperation with the United States. It can never match the military balance, but it's got to present both a credible deterrent and an energetic and creative deterrent. And that's going to mean spending money that Taiwan needs to spend on social spending. And it's going to mean attracting some young people with skill and talent, including engineering and computer talent, into the military at a time when, you know, young people love Taiwan, but they may not exactly be imagining, you know, the next 5, 10, or 20 years of their lives being dedicated to military service. This is a paradox that I haven't heard anyone in Taiwan talking about. Okay, with that, we open up the floor to anyone who has questions. I think maybe we collect a few of them, and we'll do our